Hello, everyone. My name is Kirsty Califano. I am the adult programming librarian here at Wells Turner Memorial Library. A quick announcement, please note that this presentation is being recorded. The recording will be posted to the library's YouTube channel and distributed to all program registrants following this event. If you do not wish to appear in the recording, please keep your camera and microphone turned off for the duration of the presentation and consider changing your display name. Questions may be submitted through the chat at any time and will be answered at the conclusion of the presentation. Chat questions will be read out loud anonymously and will not be attributed to individual participants. So yeah, if you have a question, please put it in the chat, and we are actually going to answer those here and there throughout the presentation. So it's a good option if you don't want to forget what you have to ask. That's all from me. I did have someone ask how to change the display name. If you click participants, and then find your name. It should be at the top. There's 3 dots next to your name. You're going to click that and it would say rename, and you just change it there. Are we good?
Yep.
Okay. So I think we can start now.
Okay.
Sharla, you can take over. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Awesome. Hi. Hi, everybody. It's awesome to be here. Thank you for having me. It's a complicated topic for sure. We don't talk about it as a society, and then we go through it. It carries a lot of emotions that none of us are really prepared to handle. And then as friends and loved ones, we aren't really prepared to support the people that it's happening for because we just don't know what that looks like. So I guess I'm here to start the conversation so that we maybe as a society can start doing that more. Um, so my name is Sharla Cook. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I have been practicing from a model called narrative therapy. And it's kind of a new way of thinking. There's been, a lot of like dissecting what has happened, and you can make meaning from it certainly, but there's not enough necessarily looking at the context in which things happen. And I think that's where the conversation needs to start going, and understanding context for things. So narrative therapy really does that. It kind of looks at the both and of things. And so where society might look at something as one thing, like your parents either did a really good job or a really bad job, or your parents hurt you or they didn't hurt you. Um, this looks at both. My parents tried really hard and they really hurt me and they did some damage. And sometimes as parents, we have to look at that feedback too, and know in our hearts, I did everything I could, and hold the space for the experience of my child didn't experience that, and I need to look at why. And for some reason, for some people, it can be very much not in the space of did I do something wrong or did I not do something wrong, right? Like it's never even right or wrong. It's just kind of like you're doing your best, and how did that land, or how was it received? So I think it's really important to be aware of how much context is part of what's going on. So I like to look at the language that we use and the both and of all the situations. And I find that approaching things with that kind of curiosity, that will give you the best outcome. And in clinical practice, when I'm working with clients, when I see people who are able to integrate those two ideas, that's where the real healing comes from. And if there are positive outcomes in wanting to get back together, families that, don't necessarily know where to even start the conversation, if you start with curiosity and holding two truths at the same time, I did my best and it didn't land how I hoped, then that can be really, really important groundwork for lasting change. So that's kind of where I want to go today, and where we want to talk about it. So let's see. Here we go. So yeah, in culture, we definitely talk mostly about, family is family, and that's your mother, and there's, they did so much for you, and there's this pressure all the time about what the effort was and not necessarily what the experience was. And that can be really hard because as a family member, say as a sibling, you can see mom's really hurting my sister, but also my sister's reaction is really hurting my mom, and having the space in that But you can get the idea of like, well, they did everything for you, and so it should, the sibling will see that they did everything for you, so you should love them, and there's this pressure about what you should feel versus what you really are feeling. And so when that's repeated enough times, you can sometimes doubt what your experience was. And that also can lead to like doubting what other people's experiences are, and that can be like a collective gaslighting. I don't know if that rings true for any of you. People come to therapy and they say, that the pain is the problem, the silence is the problem, the response is the problem, the drugs are the problem, the mental illness is the problem. And it's never fully the problem. It's usually showing up as a symptom, telling you that something's not working. And we can get used to symptoms that happen for all the time, regularly. That's something that could be really difficult. But it's important to look at what it's showing you instead of just seeing it as a thing you have to maybe bear or something that you have to stop, but looking at it as something that you need to notice and it's pointing you in some direction. When we are grieving at the end, it's not necessarily the relationship's death that estrangement is. Estrangement is usually the autopsy, and it's the looking at what didn't work here, what was the cause of death, and is there any way to go back, because it's not actually dead. There's potentially not actually dead. There's again, in society, we have the collective idea of blood is thicker than water. We hear that all the time. Blood is thicker than water. So that means that no matter what, we have to just stick it through. Family is more important than anything. And the irony is that quote is actually completely taken out of context. The full proverb is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. And that means that the covenant is a promise. And it's the promise that the bonds that we're making with people are stronger than the womb, which is where you were born. And so it really does turn out that the whole point of blood is thicker than water is, the blood of the covenant, the promises that we make to each other is thicker than the water of the womb. And that doesn't mean we don't love the person that we become estranged from. Sometimes that's a necessary thing. Sometimes it's a temporary thing. Hopefully it's a temporary thing. And it can be temporary if there's work done in this interim, in this space. So sometimes leaving is the most loving thing that you can do. Sometimes staying is doing more damage. Again, it doesn't have to be a final thing. It can be both and. It can be, I'm going to leave and I'm not planning on staying. It can be, I need to leave to guard my sanity. I need this time to figure out what happened and do this autopsy and what was the cause of death. If I had another chance, how could I do it differently? That's love. And so sometimes if you're looking at your family going, well, I love them and I would never do that because I love them. Is love the thing that you think it is? Is love worth doing damage while you're just tumbling on top of each other? Again, I'm not suggesting this is like, oh, hey, go leave. This isn't pro estrangement. This is pro, let's look at what's happening in this space, because estrangement is happening whether we want it to or not. There's a growing trend. It's happening so frequently. And I can't tell you, I feel like maybe in the last year, I've had maybe twice the amount of clients that are dealing with estrangement, and it being a core thing, not that they're going to counseling for, but it's like, oh, and by the way, we're estranged. Wow, that's a lot. Like, that's a lot to be seeing in practice. That's a lot to be seeing, as a representation of what else is out there. And so some of you are estranged, not by your own choice. And you're kind of left picking up the pieces, figuring out where do I insert myself back in? How do I communicate how, if they don't want to talk to me? And how can I tell my kid I love them when it seems like it doesn't land the way I mean? And so that's where taking this time can be really important to find out why. Let's get curious and find out why. And how can we show love in an action that is more self-driven, like looking at yourself versus showering someone else with it. And sometimes love in this instance can be loving yourself, that you have to love yourself enough to protect yourself to go. And that can be really, really hard. And it's really hard to know when that is. I think that more and more people, when I ask them to sit with it, and they're like, is it time? Is it not time? If you stop and settle down into your felt experience, you kind of do know. And I don't think that there's shame in that. Again, because it doesn't have to be closed forever. It can be, we're taking some time to figure out what didn't work. Estrangement usually happens in stages. It doesn't usually happen in one clean break. It's not usually just like one day, hey, I'm never going to talk to you again. That's a really difficult thing to do. And that's very rare that happens. It usually happens in these kind of 3 stages. First, there's reduced contact. And that just looks like you're showing up to family events less often. There's less communication, less intense texts, and less frequent. Then there is a more strategic contact point where it does feel more like, okay, what's going on? You really are like, I'm going to come to Thanksgiving, but we aren't talking about politics or religion. It could be sort of putting up boundaries. I'll do this. I will only stay for this hour. And if that doesn't sort of help with what the pain is, that, there's still a problem. If there's still something that's going on, then you move into full separation. And that can take years. This process can take years and years, usually does take years and years. And each stage is a step at trying to make life more livable. None of the steps are to hurt the other person or to hurt yourself or to, fine, I'm not doing this. It's a way of stopping pain. And again, that pain is a symptom of something. And so if you're working to just stop the pain and not looking at the symptom or what the symptom is telling you, then you kind of keep on this path towards eventual estrangement. I guess I want to stop at this point and I'm gonna look, are there any questions? Let me see in the chat here. Okay, none of those questions. Does anybody have any questions at this point, or is this resonating with anyone? All right, I think I'll just keep going. So as we were talking before, with strategic contact, there's, boundaries that you're starting to say, and a boundary can look like, I will come to Christmas, but I will stay for 1 hour. I will, oh yeah, we kind of talked about what other boundaries those can look like. So if you say a boundary without actually doing it, I will only come but for 1 hour, but then you come and stay for 5 hours, or any kind of other thing, but then you don't do it, it really ends up ultimately just being a threat. And that can be manipulative. The idea of boundaries isn't to stop someone else's behavior, it's to stop the experience you're having. So you can have, I guess this is where actually a lot of people are coming into therapy, because they're trying to understand, what is a boundary? How does that look in practice? Yeah, thanks for, it is a process. Thanks for sharing that, Kathy. So the system is going to push you back. The system of your family is working in a certain way. There's usually someone playing a different certain role. There's someone who is the peacemaker, and there's someone who's the one that uses humor to deflect things, and then there's the person who's angry all the time. And there's everyone's got a system of things. When you stop behaving in your normal role, the family's going to work really hard to adjust itself to some homeostasis. It's going to try and regulate itself so that it's back to the way it was. It's always going to try and put it back to the way it was. And when you, as part of a cog in that machine, stop doing something, the rest of that system has to adapt to what's changing. And your stepping away or boundary is a way of influencing that system. And it's important to know that you do have an influence in that system. It doesn't mean doing something largely significant or rocking the boat or doing anything major. Just exiting the system is an impact to it. And the ways that the family will try to put itself back together is through all the ways that it was dysfunctional in the first place. And so it's going to use things like guilt and anger and silence. Sometimes it'll be a flood of love bombing and like, okay, let's do this and spend time together. And and it doesn't even have to be manipulative. It can be coming from a genuine place of, well, maybe it needs more love, but it's missing the core things that are underneath. That bolus of love is not going to land the way that you hope, and then can be discouraging, and then can result in, fine, I tried and you don't want that anyways. And then that can look like it was a manipulative tactic when in reality it wasn't. It was an internal kind of collapse. But essentially, if you're not following through on the boundaries that you're setting out, they are threats, and people stop responding to those, and they stop caring, essentially. And so you need to really follow through on the boundaries. It's in this kind of space, though, that you can possibly be the villain in someone's story, which is a really high cost that ends up being paid. And I think that's also not talked about. So when you become the villain in someone's story, it can be the parent who love bombed because that's what they thought was the thing, when really the thing that was needed was a hard conversation. So in that instance, if you provided that flood of warmth and the response was not what you expected, your child responded and they were angry, and it was like, what? I just gave you all this stuff. I don't understand why you would respond like this. That can make someone a villain. Well, they were ungrateful, or they were rude, or they didn't appreciate me, or any of those things. It becomes a story, and that becomes a narrative. And there's a fear. A lot of us don't want to follow through on our boundaries because, well, what are the other people going to think? And they're going to think that I'm doing this on purpose, and I'm going to have to be a villain. And one of the things that you have to accept in the space of estrangement is that you are going to be the villain in someone's story. It doesn't mean that it's true. It means that more context needs to happen. It means more understanding is certainly needed. And that's why, again, curiosity is the key to that, because it's really understanding what's behind that. Sometimes you're going to waver. That doesn't mean that you're weak. It's just hard. And it's again, more attempts at easing the pain and keeping a relationship or keeping parts of it, because none of it's all bad. No one's all bad. In all of these relationships, in all relationships that become estranged, it's love, essentially, that was so intense and so painful that it had to stop. And so, of course, you're going to keep going back and keep making attempts at making it work. that is the natural human way of evolving and fixing things. So there's no shame in the attempts that you make to go back and then leave. If you're saying, you know, if you do this again, I'm never going to speak to you again, and then you do speak to them again, it's not about being weak, and it's not even about a manipulative tactic. Again, it's what it can look like from the outside, from someone else's story, but it's just part of this process of getting closer and figuring out what you can tolerate and what you can live with. But there is a cost to that as well, and that's worth looking at, because when you do go back, the person's other story about you can be, well, it wasn't really that important. And that's, again, just like a weird and confusing cost that we end up paying. That is not something we ever really get to talk about. Like, none of these conversations are things we have with each other. I feel like when I'm talking in therapy with people, everyone is completely like, what? We don't talk about this. Why don't we talk about this? Which is really what made me want to talk about it, because the feedback I'm getting just over and over and over is that there's just so many nuances to these things that we just don't know how to talk about. We don't even know how to name. I talked a little bit about this in an earlier slide, but looking at the family unit, Bowen is a family systems theorist and a therapist, and he talks about family as like one unit, and it's leaning towards balance all the time. And when one person changes or starts to become their own person, the whole unit is going to push it back into place, because that seems like a stable system, and that's what it's used to. And so sometimes you have other family members that get involved because they're like, well, but it's your sister, you should try really hard. Or they become like triangulated in it, and they start sending messages in between because they're trying to like make something work. And people will get caught up in it too, because they are well-intentioned in trying to fix, but they're ultimately trying to bring the family back into balance, and the balance wasn't working. So that's another layer of complexity when you are looking at your cousins and your siblings and your aunts and your uncles, and they're trying to like make things work and put it back together, and they're all not seeing that what was put together was what was not working. And again, just finding the language to be even able to say that to our family members, like, hey, this is helpful. I get that it's intended to be helpful, but it's not. This wasn't working before, and I do need things to be different. And as you think of this as one unit, the family, it's important to ask, what is your part in it? What's the role that you're playing that's keeping things in this balance? And what's happening when you pull back? I saw a couple questions in the chat, and I'm a fad. Good question. Yes. No, it's not a fad, certainly. But it's something that I think more and more people are getting to the point of saying, I can't tolerate this. And I think there's more language in society in general of putting more of a priority on self-health. And I think that we are also looking at, just happiness in general differently. I think after COVID was a real pivotal point, because it was like you were stuck in your pod. Essentially, you were really right in that unit that you kind of had to be forced to look at it. And then after that, people were like, no, I can't do this anymore, and I don't want to. And so I don't think it was necessarily a fad so much as it was a major event that made everyone be pushed to making a decision, because that was the end, if that makes sense. What percentage of recipients of the no contact are senior citizens? I wouldn't say any percentages. I really don't know. But I would say that the percentage, well, yeah, and I guess JS, I don't know if you want to follow up with this. Recipients of no contact, I'm guessing that that means the ones that aren't really choosing the no contact being senior citizens. I think that that's more a reflection on senior citizens likely have had a longer time to cultivate the story and have an understanding of the system as it is. And because that person is likely the matriarch or patriarch, there's been a lot of work from other family members to support this in that direction. And I think in the space of that, there might have been a lack of curiosity to find out what the actual problem might have been. Again, I don't necessarily think it's that the senior citizens are the ones that failed. No one failed here. I think it's really about an not understanding of what one's efforts were. And that has changed in society. And so it maybe feels like senior citizens are receiving that more, but it might be because they're having less opportunity to understand it more, if that makes sense. Would it be okay to stop here so that someone can unmute themselves if they want?
Yeah, I can do that.
Because I do want to hear some like questions that I'm not, necessarily trying to interpret.
Sure. Hold on one second. Okay, people can unmute if you want to ask a question out loud.
Is this JS, is there maybe more to that question that I can expand on?
They might want to remain anonymous, so.
That's okay. That's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure if there was, be able to attend to that. If you do have something that you want to say, I will say just kind of speak up like once you don't have. Yes, that is coming up next. So yeah, these become losses with no funeral. It feels like a lost relationship. It is a lost relationship, and you've lost that person in your life. And with other losses, you lose your mom, you lose your dad, you lose your sister, you lose your brother. There's a grieving, there's a community that brings things to you, and they care for you, and they check in on you, and there's a funeral, you can talk about it, there's a burial, and there's a closure. With estrangement, there isn't. You don't get that. No one's paying attention to that. There's often shame that's associated with it because there's a lack of understanding. And that person is alive, but they are not part of your life anymore. And it's a really hard grief. It's a really hard and deep grief that we just don't even know how to show up for each other when other people are having it and when you're going through it yourself. Researchers call it ambiguous loss, because there is a major loss, death, but you can't put your finger on it, and you can't really talk about it. And there's a lot that goes into that. One thing I do in clinical practice that's been really helpful is to have funerals for the people who are estranged or have been estranged from someone. And writing eulogies has been a good practice. And it's been very helpful in terms of, as a eulogy goes, you're looking at someone's whole story. They were born here, and this is what they did, and this is what they were about. And oftentimes in the writing of that eulogy, there is some understanding about what those other person's intentions might have been. and there's a softening about the anger, and it doesn't change the story. The story is still the story, but it becomes the story, and they did their best because this is all of the context they came out of. And that often creates a little bit more space for conversation and for curiosity. So did I hear someone? Is there someone wanted to say something?
Are you seeing us too, or is it just our unmuted?
I'm not seeing anyone. Is this Joanne?
Yes, it is.
Okay. It doesn't look like
I was trying to write you, but then it only allows so much. Then I'd get cut off and I'd have to go back in and try to write something else. So it's all disjointed.
Okay, sorry about that. What's your question?
I am just beside myself because I am now minus my only child and his 5 children because of his estrangement, the last going on 2 years. And his wife claims, she's a bitch anyway, his wife, pardon me, but my mother, my deceased mother, said that, a long time ago. Anyway, she claims she can do nothing because I'm not her responsibility. He's my only relative. I mean, I have buried everybody else in the last few years. My mother, and taken care of them, and then buried them, including my brother from ALS.
Wow, I'm sorry. So it sounds like you definitely understand the grief.
And then he was across the world, so he was never around for funerals. We had no other family. So I buried them all, with a small church service, whatever. And I barely even got, he's sorry out of it. He was the only grandchild. My sister and brother never had kids. So, I know he was close to my mother, and my brother was so generous with him. And then
Joanne,
I just want to, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you. It sounds like this is really, really important. And it sounds like this would be a good time to reach out to a counselor.
I am doing 20 minutes every other week.
Okay. Joanne, we do need to focus for everybody's
this is
benefit.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Okay.
I'm really sorry. We can maybe talk later. But just if there's like specific question.
Yeah, I'm like, it's more about me. I mean,
yeah,
I look online for these groups, and these groups say, just continue living. I am living, and I'm not, sitting around. But
I'm sorry. Let's connect afterwards, and we'll talk. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I mean, we are going to keep talking about that grief too. It's always there, right? When you're going through a loss. So there are several kinds of grief that you can deal with. One is the very obvious ones of like the holidays and the anniversaries of things. Those are ones that are on a calendar and you can kind of prepare for. But there are also days that you are kind of ambushed by. And those days are things you can less plan for. But it can be like when, I think my line got mixed up. The holidays you can plan for. And birthdays you can plan for. It's the babies, it's the funerals, it's the weddings. It's when those things come up. And then all of a sudden you're faced with, do I go? Do I see these people? And you have all the questions and then again, it keeps the cycle back on of, should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do this? Those are really hard days. And it's important to, with your own language and with your own self and with your own friends, be able to talk about the grief that goes with it. And if you know that that's coming, planning for it. In the same way, so that you would for a funeral, making meals ahead of time, not planning stressful, important decisions around that time. If you know something big is going on, schedule, plan for the grief, which is kind of strange, but something that you know is sorry, just reading these questions. Sorry, I got a little distracted. So what do we build instead? We are building families that we choose, and we are looking for safety, and we are looking for those that give in the same ways, with the same effort and intensities that we do, so that it doesn't feel like a one-sided relationship. You are looking for people that your body feels safe around, that when you feel it, you can just sink into it, and you haven't even said a word, but when you feel it, you know it. Someone that you're feeling without eggshells, you're not walking around eggshells, you're not earning your place at the table. And those people are family. And it's an action thing. Family is a verb. So one of the things that can happen is when you leave a system, you were playing a role for a long time. And now that role that you're quite used to, that was maybe maintaining in a healthy system, that role has nowhere to go. You're very good at it, but you're in a different system. And so what's super important is when estrangement happens, for both the person who leaves and the people who are left, they need to go to get some sort of therapy and understand what part of the system they have with them so that it doesn't go with you. This can be proactive in stopping other, relationships from disintegrating, but also it works retroactively in the autopsy and finding out what happened and how you can go differently and maybe possibly have a relationship with your person again. So you learned patterns to keep mom quiet or dad settled, or didn't talk about certain things, and then you come into relationships and then you flinch when someone sighs heavy and you don't think you can talk about things, and you triangulate with other people because you don't know how to say what your boundaries are or talk to someone. You've all developed parts and habits to survive the system you were in, and now you have to understand what it is. What are those things? So there's a few questions that I want to just put out there and sort of open it up to talk about. When guilt shows up, whose voice is it in? Are you hearing the guilt? Is it guilt about what you've done? Is it guilt about leaving? And is it shame-based? Is it judging? And is that voice helping? What did holding on to your relationship cost you? And what have you, well, I guess I didn't put it in here, but what did you gain by taking a break? And again, this doesn't mean estrangement forever. This means taking a break for now. And it means really using the time that you're in this estrangement to understand why. Because there's a part you played. And it was what you needed to survive. And it was with the information that you had in the context of the life that you knew. But was it working? Some people are wondering, as they're like going through like, well, should I become estranged? And what does that look like? I don't even know what that would look like. That's something I hear a lot. Most of the time, I would say all of the time, you do know. If you sink into your body, into your wisest, calmest self, and think on a regular day, what does distance feel like? Does a phone call make you tense up? That's kind of an answer. Does scheduling lunch once a week feel like, no, that's fine, that actually feels good? Then that's something you will know, but you will feel it because we feel all of this stuff in our body. And then who in life is treating you the way that you want to be treated. And that means more of like family that you choose. Do you have people in your life that are like, no, they love me in the ways that I need. They love me in the way that is active love. That's seeing me, that's seeing my story. Creating and cultivating the people around you to do that. All right, so now I just kind of want to open it up so I can see people even. That would be lovely. Stop sharing my screen if that's okay. I'm just going to read some of these questions here.
Sharla, when you're reading the questions, just don't say the name.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. There's a question about we did not leave the system, but we have freedom in the system, so we did not need to leave. So the silence, yeah, there's a lot of questions about silence, and what's happening during that time. And you're right, there's a lot that's really important. Silence. But are you doing anything in the space of that silence? Is it just empty silence where it's no one's talking, but also you're living on with your normal lives? Or is it silence where you're working on understanding what's happened? It's interesting because one silence can be super rich and the other one can be unhealthy and just lets time go by and also communicates to someone, I'm not really interested. So if silence is passing and years are going by and you're not asking yourself questions, that's can be telling too. And it's uncomfortable to look at the role we play in things. Like it just is. And that's why if you're able to have compassion for yourself and why you made decisions, why you did the things that you did, why you said the things that you said, if you can contextualize that and know I did the best that I could and I didn't say the right thing. It's both. I did the best that I could and I didn't do it the way I wanted to. Can you look at those choices that you made and own them? If you can do that, then that's where real change can be. Now, obviously, there's mental illness in there. There's drug addiction. There are lots of things that are factors that are beyond just, well, did they try or did they not try? Those things are complicated layers, but they're still just complicated layers. Love can look like I love you, but I don't know how to be in your life. Love can look like making that a conversation, like I'm in this home and you can come back anytime. Yeah, someone was talking about restoring their own mental health on that part and then taking interest in being able to connect again. Exactly. That's the best outcome in an estrangement, if that can happen, if that is able to happen. But that's like the trajectory of that is perfect. It's working in the direction of healing. Sometimes you just need space to breathe and get yourself out of a survival mode. That can strip you of energy and of your best self. So I don't know. I think it's just about really looking at the context and taking the time in silence to help. I'm interested. I'm seeing someone talk about the attorney who's like the legal side of this. I don't know if you want to speak more about that. Just reading some of these questions. It's interesting because I'm wanting to ask like questions and get feedback, but there's this is not the space to do that. And so my instinct is to go into teacher mode and get, yeah. Is this resonating with people? Are there things that don't sit right? And how many of you are looking for help? And I don't mean necessarily me. It doesn't, it can be a pastor, it can be a therapist in your area, it can be even just, you know, groups online. There's ways that you can connect with other people, but try not to keep it silent, because that's part of what's the problem, part of what's keeping a society that doesn't know how to talk about it. It keeps it buried in shame, and that can be its own poison and its own burden, and you don't want to make yourself have more stress and more intensity because of that. So it's just really important to be working on your part of things and figuring out how to do it differently, even if you weren't part of what did it wrong, because again, it's not like right or wrong. It's just about what can be better. There's always something that can be a little bit better, and sometimes just the curiosity is enough to get you there. Yeah, so that's what I have for today. If there isn't any other comments or questions.
I think I'm gonna hold off on mute again. So any questions can go to chat. I'll give you a minute if anybody has a general question that would apply to everybody, not like a specific situation.
I did not see the Oprah podcast about it. But it is speaking to everyone. Sorry, just the increase in it being a thing that's happening more and more, and not because it's a fad, but just because we're starting to be able to talk about it. And it's also been happening for years and years, but it's the conversation that has not been coming up. And I think we owe it to ourselves and our friends to talk about it. And if you know someone in your life that is estranged from someone, check in on them. Like it's a very hard and private and painful thing to carry, and it can be very lonely. And if you can anytime check in on your people who have the chosen family, it's just going to be hugely important. So yeah. All right, I think that's about it.
Okay. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Sharla, for giving the presentation. I think it has been very helpful. If you have do you have your contact information that you want to put back up on the screen for people?
I didn't because I thought that we weren't supposed to do that. So
oh, you can give it if you wanted to put it in the chat. Even people can have it that way to work with you.
that's my website. There's directly comment on there, and there's a place on there too where the contact sheet isn't necessarily like you have to know exactly what. It's kind of like share your story. Maybe you don't even know what you want. Maybe you're not sure if you want therapy, but you just know that there's something uncomfortable and you got to get it out. There's a spot on there, and you can just kind of blah and get it out there. And someone's listening. Someone's listening for sure. You're not alone. I am in line forever.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you again, and thank you everyone again. Be well and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for having me.